It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
I want to play a game. Groovy.
Hello and welcome to the Sounds from the Grave podcast. My name is Yussef.
And my name is Vania.
And listen to them, children of the night, what music they make.
That is our quote from Dracula. So
Yes.
I know that we have been quiet yet again, and I'm sorry, holidays and festivities and
Yeah.
just a lot of crazy stuff in our lives. But
Oh yeah.
we're here to give you guys another exciting episode of soundtracks from a lot of classical movies or even some more modern-esque movies.
True.
Is that right, Yusuf?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we were kind of running around with this idea for a bit of like soundtracks and music make such a big part of horror movies. Like sometimes you even hear just the music and you just immediately think of a specific scene or just the movie in general. So we figured, why not talk about some of our favorite ones and the ones that we like the most,
I really think that with the horror movie craze, and especially that the music makes up for it so much because it's the build up, the intensity that makes the entire soundtrack of horror films in general.
Yeah, exactly. Because like I said earlier, like people correlate it so much with a specific movie. Like when they hear it outside of that, they're like, "Why am I hearing this right now?" Yeah, especially too when it's that whole thing of not even the soundtrack itself, but let's say like a song that was used in a horror movie. Like you hear that song now to it, and you're like, "Oh God, it's from." It's like, "Oh, it's from Insidious" or something like that.
You know, always like combine or like connect the song "Don't Fear the Reaper" with Zombieland. I always tend to like do that, which is like literally the weirdest thing, especially with like HHN
Oh
and
yeah.
whatnot. Like I always like correlate that song every time I hear it. It's like, oh, Zombieland. Like I don't relate it to any other movie out there or horror film, if anything.
Oh no, I always think of "Don't Fear the Reaper." I just think of Will Ferrell with that cut off shirt doing cowbell on Saturday Night Live. Like the first thing I ever think of with that. But yeah, without further ado, let's get started and like talk about some of those big iconic horror soundtracks.
So I think we should start off with the classics, which is
Yes.
Universal Monsters.
Yes, for sure. Because I mean, those soundtracks are iconic, especially because before the movie even starts, like they're the first thing you hear in those movies.
Yeah, and it's definitely one of those build-ups that definitely with the talkies era, we have already experiencing the mixing of audio and also of just not microphoning, what do we call it, just with speech and music and mixing it together. So it definitely like creates, it's combining the silent era almost with talkings to actually like create more of an intense movie experience.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely heightens the atmosphere of what you're like, the emotions that they wanted you to feel, and kind of get you. It's essentially just like, okay, here's what you're going to be expecting. Like this is the type of music we're going to be doing. This is the type of movie we're going to be doing.
Yeah, so call me a heathen, but I think for me, I have not seen Dracula, the classic Universal Monster. I mean, I have seen it. That's a lie. I have seen it, but I guess I didn't appreciate it enough until like I went to college at UCF where we watched scenes from it, and I think I haven't really sat down to analyze it since before then, because we were mostly concentrating on like Frankenstein and like the audio mixing of like Bride of Frankenstein as well, which I think Bride of Frankenstein has an absolutely beautiful soundtrack, and I think it's one of the most beautifully like created out there, I guess you could say.
Would you say that's your favorite of like soundtrack from the horror movie, like the Universal Monsters?
Yeah, absolutely. I think
Okay.
it's just like very it's a very romanticized soundtrack, but it's, of course, as you guys already know, like what we consider horror now, back then, I guess you could, back then they probably considered it horror, but if we were to talk to anybody that's obviously not a horror film person, they're just going to be like, oh, that wasn't even scary. Like,
Yeah.
you're just putting someone in makeup and, just unrealistic features. And with all the cheesy music and the cheesy pop-ups and just like the cheesy, like, storyline in general, it's not going to be scary to anybody
Mhm.
now. But mind you, that's what people considered scary back then. Just the especially if we're going to be talking about like makeup, the fact that we can change makeup to make it create it into a creature that, of course, it doesn't give that really cheesy effect, at least back then.
Mhm.
So I
And
think definitely for sure.
and I always thought of it too as like, I don't think this movie, or I don't think the music was meant to scare you. I think it was
Mhm.
more to set the scene, set the atmosphere, and it was also a form of theatricality, because in those times you didn't just like go to the movies and be like, I'm gonna go see a movie. It was like it was like a thing. It was an event. Like, it was like a show that you went to see. So I feel like
Yeah.
part of that was like, it's big, it's grandiose, it's theatrical. I feel like that's what they really nailed with
I think
all the
I
Universal
think
Monster soundtracks.
I think it's more of a theatrical slash show.
Hmm.
Okay, not show tunes too much, but it's like I don't know what's the word for it. Yusuf, help me. It's like what are those like it's just the music that that when you're starting to watch, for example, I think Snow White. Snow
Hmm.
White is actually very terrifying.
Hmm.
And the fact that it has like the scenery to like go with the storyline, and it's just the build up that it just sounds very um
Yeah.
television-esque, I guess you could
Hmm.
say.
I would even say
I don't
like
know if that
orchestral
makes
too,
sense.
just like boom, it's like just so orchestral, and
Yeah.
yeah, you know what I mean?
Especially like at the end of Bride of Frankenstein, there's just like that really emotional impact
I
of
know,
like
yes.
violins and very romantic, and that he's about to basically, spoiler alert, if you haven't watched Bride of Frankenstein, please skip ahead. Don't watch.
Don't do
Don't.
that. Just
Like, he basically I think he pulls like a kind of lever or a rope. I
I think
forgot what it
yeah,
was.
I think it was a rope, if I'm not mistaken, but it's been a
Rope,
while
but
since
then
I saw
he
it. So.
says "We belong dead," and then it's just the music, and everything falls, and
Hmm.
it really builds up to that moment. Especially when we're introduced to Bride of Frankenstein, at least that's for me. I can talk about Bride of Frankenstein all day. Sorry.
What's interesting too is when you listen to the soundtrack without watching the film, like just listening to the soundtrack, I feel like it makes the movie better when you watch it after listening to just the soundtrack, because now you understand the music behind it, you understand what kind of emotional impact they were going for, and like that's so important, I think. Like, if you ever get the
Yeah,
chance to listen to just the soundtrack and then watch the movie and like see how different everything is.
yeah. I think that since Bride of Frankenstein, it has a lot of more emotional, romantic, symphonic like impact on a story. I think Frankenstein and Werewolf has more and also the Creature of the Black Lagoon have a more serious,
Yeah,
tough, like
definitely. Like,
impact on the storyline.
yeah, they're a lot more like kind of in your face and just like boom, here it is, like this is it.
Yeah,
It's kind of how I
I think.
feel. I feel like The Mummy is a mixture of both of those, honestly, because The Mummy still has that like kind of a masculine sound to it, but at the same time it has those slower paced or more romanticized pieces because of
Yeah,
what goes on in the movie, and Emotep thinking that the woman he's going after is like his long lost love and stuff like that. So I feel like The Mummy is a perfect combination of those two.
yeah.
And I think that's why it's my favorite of like all the
Oh,
Universal
yours is the
monsters.
Mummy.
Oh yeah, I love the soundtrack and the score to the Mummy.
Yeah, for sure. I still haven't seen the Dracula's Bride one. I think maybe there could be a similarity with Bride of Frankenstein, because it's also
Hmm.
like
Possibly, yeah, because
romanticized
I
story.
yeah, because I personally haven't seen it. I haven't really seen any of like the sequels or spin-offs for like the Universal
Yeah,
monsters, like Frankenstein meets the Wolfman and like that kind of stuff. I haven't really seen any of that. Um,
guys, go on Peacock.
Yeah, I need to catch up on those because I know they're all over
Yeah,
Peacock. I need
same.
to sit down and watch a bunch of them.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of the spin-offs besides Bride of Frankenstein. I should because I love the art of Carl Emile and the fact that his story is just so inspiring. And sometimes to life what him to have like to work with all these directors that he helped out of Germany
Hmm.
during two and whatnot, especially with Hitler being a crazy person. But like and all that stuff. So the horror genre like inspired that entire era, and it gave people
Hmm.
hope, especially going to the cinema going through
Exactly.
during that time in another world and another reality where they actually felt relaxed and forgot.
Hmm. Yeah, and I feel like that part of that kind of got lost, like after the 40s, like between the 50s and 60s. I feel like some of that got lost because I think in the 50s we were really into like the big B movie craze of like the whole nuclear scare type stuff with like here's the giant grasshoppers, here's the giant spiders, here's the
About
big
their reality.
aliens from
I've
outer
never
space.
seen any of those
And
movies.
yeah,
I've
they're
seen
not
like
my
watches.
cup of tea. I'm not a huge fan of them.
I mean, like I'm kind of like curious to watch them
Mm.
because I want to see how bad
I
they're like.
Yeah, like I've
Really,
seen a few of them just like out of curiosity, and some of them are just weird. Like they're interesting, but they're weird. Um, I would say one of the funniest ones that I've seen, and this is just a random tangent. I think this was funny enough. It was like released in the early '70s, but it's definitely a callback to like that style of movie, and it was a movie called Night of the Lepus, and it is literally a movie about giant bunnies,
oh,
where giant bunnies attack a town. But what's really funny about it is obviously they don't have giant bunnies, so they just filmed like really close, like close-ups of bunnies just running around in slow motion. And they're also running around miniature, so it's just like the cutest thing you've ever seen, and it's not scary at all.
I want to see it because that's hilarious. Oh my
It's
gosh.
like the weirdest thing I've ever heard of. It's like, why make a movie about giant killer rabbits? Like, why?
Add any effect to the rabbits, like they feed it berries and it looks like it's like
Yeah, they put like
foaming at the
red, or
mouth
they
or
put like red
red.
paint on it a little bit just to make it look like it's all bloodied up. It's ridiculous. Like,
Yeah.
I'm over here like HHN, put that in as a joke house.
Oh no, it happened. HR Blood and Guts.
There we go. There we go.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's it.
literally a whole ass bunny, like rabid. Does that? I'm like, oh, is that raspberry you're eating? Yeah, that scare actor was probably not happy. I'm like, no, it's blood. Stop.
Stop.
Let me be scary for once. I mean, like, I think people who like do that, like, they have so much fun doing those funny roles of
Mm.
things that, just like, what was it? The movie Holidays, just like
I
obnoxious.
love that movie. Holidays is so good.
So weird, but it's like so interesting to
Yeah.
me. Wait, we're straying away from the topic
But
of
yes, we
like
are.
soundtrack, so let's get back on track.
Hmm.
What else can we talk about?
So I think, like I said earlier, I think like kind of in like the late '40s, early '50s, there wasn't a lot to write home about music wise. But I feel like once the '60s hit, it got elevated to a whole other thing. And I think like
Yeah.
the beginning of that was Bernard Herrmann's score for Psycho.
Oh
Like
yes,
the score for Psycho is incredibly good.
and even when I was at UCF, we studied the ever living crap out of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, and the fact that the shower scene is so iconic.
Hmm.
It's such a build up that it's just like you. It's it's the perfect combination of their silence because she thinks she's fine. She's about to jump in the shower after she, of course, reduces the amount that she had originally from the stolen
Hmm.
money. Sorry, part of the plot. Spoiler alert. Sorry, you guys a warning. But then she goes into the shower, and then it's like that moment of silence where we hear a buildup that goes until we finally see the shower scene, the silhouette
Mm-hmm.
of woman, and then finally we hear and then it's just very fast paced after that, and it
Exactly.
just it's the build up that definitely makes it for this movie, for any type of scene in that movie. But that one just happens to always stand out to everybody. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if you haven't heard it at a theme park or a horror event, like they're doing
Yeah,
something
it's
wrong.
and that's going back to one of those things that like you hear it outside of the movie itself, and you're like, oh, that's Psycho. Like you know exactly what it's from. It's reached that lexicon of pop culture where like everybody knows what it is at this point. And
I,
and I think it also the actual soundtrack itself or the score kind of harkens back to that era of the Universal monsters because one like if you let's say you listen to it from start to finish, the prologue is like the perfect way to start the Psycho story. Like it already grabs you because it's like this fast paced orchestral piece, and you're like, okay, we're getting in it. Like, all right, strap in because here it goes.
yeah. Unlike Bride of Frankenstein, well, I'm just gonna keep referring to this movie. Sorry, you guys are just never hear the end of it, and you also won't ever hear the end of me talking about Bride of Chucky too. But the fact that I'm gonna compare it to this one because in Bride of Frankenstein, it is the
Mm-hmm.
slowest build up, which is the only con to that movie. Is
I
that I'm like, it's literally one of those things in that movie, and I'm like, why are we taking so freaking long to get to the point? Like, or to where we see that they're collecting a female body to
hmm
bring back to life. It's just a slow build up that you have to be very patient with it.
yeah, it's I like the slow. I love movies with a slow build up that then explodes into something. But I agree that Bride of Frankenstein takes a lot more time than usual to kind of get going.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind the slow build up, but
Mm-hmm.
it's unusually slow.
Yeah.
It's like I've seen this movie a million times and I'll always love it because it's that chef's kiss masterpiece. But still, like that's the only problem I have with the movie. But hey, if that's the way it's meant to be, then whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is what it is. It's still one of the most loved movies out there, next to Frankenstein, Wolfman, Dracula, obviously, because a lot of people like Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like with the um, Psycho, it definitely goes right into the
Mm-hmm.
action, and
Exactly.
we're seeing this woman escape, and the fact that she's in big, big trouble. So it's definitely something that I think it's a little different from any other horror film that
Yeah,
people have
definitely.
seen.
Yeah, I think it was definitely a mix of, like I said earlier, the classic sounds of the Universal Monsters scores mixed with Alfred Hitchcock's trademark, like, directorial style. And then, like, going, like, and like, as the 60s wore on, I feel like music became a more important part of the stories they were trying to tell. And I think a really, really good example of
Less
that, too, is.
theatrical. I think it's less theatrical though. The music
Um,
is less
I
theatrical
think
in a
it.
sense.
Yeah, I would say it gets a little bit less
It's not
theatrical,
like
but it
Universal
also
Monsters
gets more
sets
unique
the mood. Yeah,
because now,
absolutely.
yeah, it gets to the point where you're like you can identify the music with the movie.
Yeah.
Like for example, Rosemary's Baby. Like the score to Rosemary's Baby is chilling. I find it terrifying just because of like all the choral voices and like it's just creepy to me. It's just like this like random chanting here and there of like the music and oh man, it's crazy.
Man, I need to think. I feel like I've watched this movie with chanting not too long ago. That freaked me out, but I can't put my finger on it. It's kind of weird. But
Yeah.
it is what it is. I don't think I've seen Rosemary's Baby yet, but I heard it's very scary or
Yeah.
like very like not chilling.
Yeah, I would say it is. Yeah, I would definitely say it is. I definitely believe that it's not only disturbing, but it's also very atmospheric because it's also kind of a slow burn movie and it really sets the atmosphere of like you kind of know what's going to happen, but at the same time, it might not happen. At this point, I think like in the 70s, horror became they kind of considered it a little bit more of an art form again, because you had
Yeah.
like these big budget horror movies that did really well with professionally produced soundtracks, and they were very much in the public eye. And for example, something like The Exorcist.
Oh yeah,
Like
absolutely.
The Exorcist is a great soundtrack.
Yeah, very chilling. I cannot sleep. Every time
Yeah,
I watch that movie, I always have nightmares.
like
But it's like
Tubular
whatever.
Bells is just iconic.
Hmm.
Yeah,
I
and
definitely like enjoyed the Exorcist soundtrack because it
Mhm.
definitely, especially like the main theme, like you can never go wrong with the main theme of the Exorcist
yeah,
because it's like something that really like sets the boundaries of like what's basically how I would describe the soundtrack. It's like something that we are experiencing but we can't see, which is why is the whole theme of kind of the whole movie because Reagan gets taken over by a demon, which obviously is from another like. Sorry if I get this wrong because it's been like I haven't watched this movie in like half a year, so and I always like forget the details. But like an Egyptian or like somewhere in
I think
the
it's Sumerian.
Sumerian, yeah,
I
like
think.
kind of ruins. And like the fact that she gets possessed, but it's something that they cannot physically see or something that we can't see with the public eye. And I think that's the way that I can perfectly describe this soundtrack
Mhm.
for The Exorcist because it's like it sets that story in so well. And I can't really say that about a lot of soundtracks, honestly, because when you hear a soundtrack, you think of the storyline, but you don't think of like a language behind it.
Mhm.
I think The Exorcist is just one of those movies that it messed with people. People, of course, you guys heard it all. People were going to church, committing suicide,
Yeah,
walking to the theater midway.
throwing up in theaters, fainting in theaters. Just it really
Exactly.
reached people.
So,
You know,
but it
it,
definitely a landmark in the horror movie history, I guess you
yeah.
could say.
And you know what I think it did too? It and in terms of its soundtrack, I think it took things that people thought they knew and kind of turned it on its head. Because some
Yeah.
of the soundtrack in that film, some of the score features almost like twisted versions of traditional like Catholic like chanting. I guess is the word
Yeah.
for it. And
Hmm.
they kind of used that of like, hey, this is messing like with religion at this point. Like
Yeah.
we're not afraid to fuck with religion.
Oh man. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty sure it's the horror movie industry. Like they already pushed those
Hmm.
boundaries of like we're just gonna touch religion. We're just gonna do it like literally without any being afraid of comeback. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure there's a lot of people like in the 70s when they watched The Exorcist, especially churches came after like probably trying to say you can't use our religion like that. That's like oh like you're turning our people against Satan, that kind of thing.
But this is the
Um,
best thing about horror. It's meant to bring up these taboo subjects people normally don't
yeah,
talk about. They're like, whatever, we'll do it right now.
yeah. I think that this is gonna be because I don't know if I actually talked about this before in this podcast. I still have a little tiny Christian child in me hanging on to its dear religion, like because I was raised upon Christianity. But for me, it's I feel like it's more of a personal relationship, with God or whatever being you might believe in, or whatever religion or practices that you might be in. But I feel like for an episode of Sounds from the Grave, we should touch on what religions have influenced the
Hmm.
horror films, like regarding, of course, Exorcist with Christianity and other like Sumerians, and Midsummer paganistic,
Yeah.
what was it, Hereditary. Like I think there would be an interesting episode.
Oh
That's just
yeah.
me though.
Oh no, that would be really really cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, real quick, going back on The Exorcist before we move on. Um, personally, like I used to go to Catholic school as a kid, and we used to have to go to service every once in a
Mhm.
while. So I remember hearing, like those big, like "Oh, si, da, di," with like the Latin and everything like that.
Gregorian chants. Yeah, I love
Yeah,
those.
so
Like Enigma.
hearing, yeah,
Like I love Gregorian chants
so
as well.
like hearing that in a movie, then completely using that to mess with you was effective to me because I had grown up listening to that stuff as a kid. So then like
Yeah.
hearing it in a horror landscape was just so weird to me at the time.
Yeah, and another like movie. As I jump another decade, sorry, I have a really bad habit of doing that. Just how many of us? I think it was Tiny Tim.
Oh
Uh,
God, Tiny Tim.
we literally remember that shit from SpongeBob. SpongeBob, and then Insidious decided to say, "Let me just mess with your childhood real quick."
Tiptoe through the window.
It's so bad. It's just like we not just using original soundtracks, but just grabbing music that we
Mhm.
all know and just twisting it. Well, obviously not like, of course, poppy songs, but more of a song that's from old style or like, and they just twist it just like
Yeah.
Yussef said. Actually, lose
But and then other 70s films that had like these huge soundtracks. I mean, this one, like as soon as you hear this, you just know what it is, and that's bottom, bottom,
Okay.
bottom.
But listen. I'm one of those people. God, Aaron, please don't listen to this podcast. Like, I think like Jaws is not considered a horror film. That's just me, though.
It's like a horror adventure film. I mean, it's a story about a killer shark.
Yeah, but that's like like almost like a thriller. I know that thriller also falls into the subcategory of horror, but it's more like an action thriller, at least for me.
No,
But
no, I straight up consider that a horror movie.
oh God, I can just hear Erin, please. I mean, I don't think she listens to us, but if she does, I can just literally see her coming after me, and I'm like,
I'm gonna, you know what? I'm gonna message her and be like, go after her specifically for this now.
yeah, I'm like, you should listen to our
just
podcast
to mess with you.
This, and go after cultists. Just saying.
Just go for
it. Yeah, but I don't know. Like, I guess I'm gonna have to rewatch it to see if I'll change my mind.
Mhm.
But I think it's more of a action thriller.
Okay, because I mean, like, yeah, like,
I mean, I don't mind talking about it for sure, but it's definitely an iconic scene where we just hear the ba-da, 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 ba-da.
And not only that, like when you rewatch it, looking for horror movie tropes, you're like, some of them are already there, like the whole similar to Halloween with the POV shots of the killer, the mounting tension as as the killer gets closer.
Yeah.
And even similar to Halloween 4 when like the band of community vigilantes is like, let's go after this thing. It's the same thing that happens in Jaws. So that's why I see a lot of similar stuff in there.
That's the one that I always think about from Halloween, because Halloween definitely has a soundtrack that sticks out.
Iconic, just beautiful soundtrack.
Yeah, especially like every time I hear go to like the HHN house, it's just you just hear the boo. There's like choo, and then it's just like that's it. You know, not even like that one's great and all, but I like the other one. Like I personally like that.
Like that Sting like musical.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I like. Okay, so here's the thing that I love the most about the Halloween soundtrack. It is extremely simple. Because it's just a piano and a slight synthesizer and like a couple of drum sounds. But it works. It's so effective.
Yeah.
It builds so much tension and it really sets such a high atmosphere for what the film is trying to do.
So another fun fact, I mean, I know this is kind of straying away from the soundtrack concept a little bit, is the fact that I had a professor from UCF. Her name is Lisa Mills. Not Lisa Mills. Yeah, it's Lisa Mills. But her IMDb is Lisa Peterson. Nightmare on Elm Street had to be a budgeted film. It was a movie that they were not sure that it was gonna do well.
Mm.
So
I kind of figured as much with a premise like what Nightmare has.
yeah. So the fact that I also think, this is where I gotta tie two and two together. We hear the 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. 3, 4, better
Mhm.
lock the door. 5, 6. As we hear kind of a similar premise, of course, it's not a Halloween theme with Trick or Treat, where we hear the kids chanting in the beginning of the
Yeah,
movie. Yeah, so I
exactly.
think it's one of those, Gregorian chant, but using child choruses to like definitely create the scene of each movie, especially
Mhm.
when dealing with children in a movie like that.
Yeah, and even going back to Halloween too, not just the first Halloween, but I feel like the whole Halloween franchise has so many strong scores and soundtracks.
Hmm.
Like I have a really really soft spot for Halloween 3, like as a movie, even though it's complete batshit craziness.
Yeah.
But the opening music to Halloween 3, like Chariots of Pumpkins, it's
Oh
so
yeah.
good. Like I feel it's just like pre synthwave.
Yeah.
Like it's
It's
just
definitely like the
beautiful.
80s vibe. It's just
Yeah.
the fact that the 80s, as we jump to the 80s, I guess right now,
Mm.
it was just the slasher craze,
Yeah.
and it was just mostly, because I'm pretty sure they were dealing with like killers such as Ted Bundy and all that. So they're just Ed Gein, like
The
they're
Night
just trying to
Stalker.
grab, yeah, Night Stalker, Zodiac Killer. And I'm pretty sure because all of those were happening or the trials were closing for each and every one of those, it's like because everybody was so invested in those, I guess, those cases about the
Hmm.
killers that, I guess it just created a whole wave of like serial killer movies and not serial killer slashers, I guess you could say. They're not
Yeah.
serial killers because they're not real in a sense, but like
But
they
they
were
kind
very
of
much inspired after
they
those.
were inspired by serial killers. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
definitely like the soundtracks for each and every one of those movies are
Hmm.
definitely very 80s, but then they're either also really simple as well, Like it's just a play on music and a play on storyline
Hmm.
depending on what the soundtrack is.
Yeah. But real quick, before we move on to the 80s, I want to give a special mention to the mid to late 70s Italian like slashers and like even the early 80s stuff. The
What?
soundtracks are so good. I love like the disco beats that they used. I don't know why I love them so much. I just really do. Like something like Cannibal Holocaust and even like Eaten Alive and like stuff like Zombie and Zombie 2 or Zombie 3, I think. Yeah, Zombie 3. Um, like the music in those movies, I don't know why they're like super funky and like like synth heavy, and I just think they're really good. But anyway, let's move on from that's a whole nother thing.
There we go again, Yussef. Movies. By the way, if it gives you really weird like movies to watch, don't watch them. Not
What?
spooky movies. Spooky movies are awful.
Listen, that's part of the fun.
I mean, I'll Google them. It's fine.
Like I have
Anyway,
I have a love. I mean, we're both no to low budget filmmakers, so like we appreciate, or at least I feel like I can appreciate what people do
yeah,
with no
but
to low
you're over
budget.
the top. You're over the top, sis. I do low budget, but not like that. Sorry.
I mean, I love what they try to do with a minimal budget. I mean, look at something like Halloween. Halloween was shot on a shoestring budget. Like it was completely independent, and for a while it was the most successful independent film of all time until Kevin Smith made Clerks.
Yeah, but then they practically. Well, other than her being the daughter of one of the most famous actresses there, I mean, they still hired a very high-end actress anyway.
Mm. Yeah, in a way
Protagonist.
they did.
What was her
Yeah,
name? I
Jamie Lee
forgot.
Curtis.
Jamie Lee Curtis. I don't know why I always wanted to call her Carrie Fisher. I'm like, that's Star Wars. Why am I
No,
like this? No, but it's like Carrie something. I was like, oh, Carrie.
yeah, but
Jamie,
I mean, at the same time, at least at that point, I don't think she
she's
was that big of a name.
she's money.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think like at the time, like the biggest thing about Jamie Lee Curtis was that she was Janet Leigh's daughter, and Janet Leigh was in Psycho, so it was like, oh, horror runs in the family.
Yeah.
But at the time, I think the biggest draw was Donald Pleasance, Loomis, because he was a respected actor at the time. He had been in like big budget films, like he had been in some of the James Bond movies, like he was one of the main villains in some of the James Bond movies. So like he was like the main draw, kind of like what they did with Alec Guinness in Star Wars. Like he was your big budget like actor, where like most of your money went because you wanted a big actor.
Yeah. What's crazy is that I didn't mean strangle you a little bit. I only knew Jamie Lee Curtis from like Freaky Friday, but then
I
when
did
I
too
went
at the
back
time,
to
honestly.
yeah, and then as I watched horror films, I was like, "Yo, what the heck? That's Jamie Lee Curtis!"
Yeah,
Or like
it's
mom
funny
from
because
Freaky Friday, like it's really weird.
like here's my evolution of Jamie Lee Curtis. Like as I got exposed to it, it was Freaky Friday, True Lies, Activia commercials. Like that was my exposure to Jamie Lee Curtis before I got into horror.
Yeah, I think for me it was just straight up Freaky Friday because.
But she's such a queen. I love Jamie Lee Curtis so much.
So I think I mean I really shouldn't get into.
We went on a whole. I love how we went on like a whole tangent about Jamie Lee Curtis for a second there, but let's get back to what we were doing.
Yeah. I forgot. I'm sorry, Jamie Lee Curtis, for slandering your name. You're not Carrie Fisher, but rest in peace, her too. All right, go ahead.
But moving into the '80s with the whole slasher craze, soundtracks were a kind of a medium part of that. Like there were some movies that had like iconic soundtracks, like something like Nightmare on Elm Street. Like the Charles Bernstein score is so good; it's so eerie. It's just so chilling too, as well. And then going almost to a classic type of Universal Monsters type music, Henry Manfredini's score for the Friday the 13th movies.
Yeah,
because like those sound like classic, actually like movie scores, like that style of score.
Yeah, and that's where the whole stereotype of if you go to camp and sleep with one of the counselors, you just automatically
listen. If you fuck or smoke weed, you're done for.
Yeah, essentially.
I like how I try to combine the two. If you smuck. If you smuck. That's going to be a new thing. I'm going to make a t-shirt now. If you smuck.
If you do this, you are done for.
If you smuck, you're done for.
Yeah, we need one.
But, something that we haven't still mentioned yet, one of the biggest soundtracks for any horror movie or for any movie, that's The Shining.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed Shining. I think The Shining for me, as much as I do enjoy the soundtrack, especially at the beginning of the movie, where it's like dun, 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 and then we see the car driving to the hotel and all that stuff. But like, I think the one thing that stands out to me about The Shining is the colors, because the colors actually reverse the actual. It's not a reverse on the actual mood of the movie. It's just like it conveys a mixture of emotions that are in the room.
Gotcha.
Which is I think for me, that's what stands out the most about The Shining. But I think I'm gonna have to rewatch it to really understand the soundtrack, because I definitely enjoyed the soundtrack in the beginning and everything. Of course, everything else with when the Here's Johnny and you already know. Accelerated scenes.
Yeah, and for me, there's so many like iconic pieces of music that complement the iconic pieces of the film, like the kind of like the rising violins for the elevator scenes, and the giant just like in your face violence of the twins, like when they show the twins murder.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And then
when the blood rushes.
Yeah. And I think honestly one of my favorite pieces of music from there is the chase scene at the end when Jack Nicholson's chasing Danny down the maze. Yeah. Like that whole section, that whole like scene is really good, but the whole music part of it too is just so tense.
Yeah, it's almost exhilarating as we are trying to like kind of keep up with Danny, because we kind of feel exhausted just seeing that, because we're just running for our lives, of course, in a psychological way. But definitely, yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And again, this is kind of going back to it too. The 80s kind of kept bringing more of that big budget horror type movies with like the really iconic soundtracks. I mean, something like Poltergeist, or even now. I always consider this movie a horror comedy because it has horror elements in it, but Gremlins. The music for Gremlins is amazing.
It's great. I
The
love
music
it.
for Gremlins is so nice. It's so good.
And I also consider Beetlejuice a horror comedy as well. And I think
There
a
you
lot of
go.
this
Yeah.
like stands out to me because it's just like everything is so like the music is very whimsical and it puts you into the world when we visit the
Mhm.
afterlife, you could say, and it fits everything, you know,
Yeah.
like from all the well, whether using the music from Jump in the Line and
Yeah, the Henry Belafonte stuff. Yeah.
it has a life of its own. Like
Exactly.
the soundtrack has a life of its own.
And I think what I like too is the fact that the music, like you said earlier, the music is so whimsical, but I feel like it also counteracts the subject matter because it's a movie about dealing with death and what comes after death.
Yeah.
You know? And the way it deals with it is, let's make it fun. You know, it's not all dreary. It's not all woe is me and stuff. It can be fun.
Yeah, and especially like it's like passing on to the afterlife and
Mhm.
what to do, and when I guess properly passing on or how to deal with it. I guess like essentially because we already see the couple that just they're not sure what to do with their abilities
Mhm.
now that they're able to not kind of do whatever they want, but it's more like oh no, it's very weird.
Like
I definitely
there's a certain freedom
yes,
in their a certain release in their deaths.
yeah, like, and they get to live wherever, well, not wherever they want, but like they can live freely without no worries of real
Mhm.
world life, and they still get to interact with the one child that can see them.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Um, but I think outside of that, I don't think there's any other huge like iconic pieces of music in the '80s. Not that I can think of, at least. Yeah, I mean it's so good. It's just so nice. It just puts a smile on my face every time I think of the Gremlins like music or I hear it.
yeah,
But
I love it.
now in the '90s, I think we get to like the weird, like throw heavy metal and rock into every single horror movie. I think really,
Essentially,
yeah. Like I can't really think of any huge '90s scores except maybe for like Scream.
yeah, that's what I was thinking. But I did Scream have guitar? I can't
I
tell.
I I don't think it did. I think it had more of an orchestral soundtrack.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. Even though, like, I found out that Scream was basically making fun of the slasher
oh yeah,
craze,
it's
still
straight
tell in
parody.
a very great way.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah. Hold on.
I think if I were to go for I wouldn't. Okay, this may or may not be a horror movie. It's definitely a
Yeah,
suspenseful movie, but Jurassic Park. The score for Jurassic Park creates so much suspense and creates so much tension as just as a soundtrack. Not the movie itself, but like just the soundtrack itself. If you listen to it on its own, it's a very tense like pieces of music. Like they really build suspense. Like I
yeah.
would consider it a
I
horror.
I agree.
Yeah, like I would consider the soundtrack a horror soundtrack. The movie I would consider like a thriller suspense movie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
but
that
the
action
soundtrack is
thriller.
definitely horror in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of movies that have a lot of horror element
Hmm.
soundtracks, but then the movie can be completely different.
Yeah.
I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I feel like I've watched a couple of those. But for sure, like for me, Jurassic Park is kind of the same category
Hmm.
as well
Yeah,
as
like it's like a science fiction thriller essentially.
yeah,
Yeah.
a prehistoric, not prehistoric, like monster, kind of like going into that 50s budgeted craze, but
Yeah,
instead
it's a monster movie. It's
big
essentially a
budgeted now.
50s monster movie. It's like, hey, we
Yeah,
brought dinosaurs back to life, you know?
yeah, or we have a giant killer
Yeah.
shark.
Now
It has
the book on the other
million
hand,
malfunctions.
the book is a straight up science fiction horror book, like Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
It's a lot more violent. It's a lot more suspenseful. It's a lot more tense. Like, it's dark. It's a dark book.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't doubt it.
Mhm.
I haven't read any of it, but I should.
I definitely recommend it. It's one of my favorite books.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, like I said, there's really not a lot to write about, at least in my opinion, in the '90s. There's not like soundtracks that jump out to me.
I can just hear someone being offended. How dare you?
I know somebody's gonna be like, "What about this?" I'm like, "Oh, I didn't even think of that. That's a very good suggestion. That's a very good opinion."
We'll talk about it later.
Yeah. Actually, is this a '90s? Is Candyman a '90s movie? I think it's from like '92 or '93. So closely, I would say the soundtrack to Candyman. Like Helen's theme in Candyman, like the it's so good. Like it really sets the scene for what Candyman is, because it's like sort of whimsical, but you can also hear a lot of darkness behind it, because it does kind of deal with like folklore and like what creates a myth, what creates a legend.
Mm-hmm.
So you get like a sense of like a fairy tale almost, but it's a very dark, very twisted fairy tale.
Yeah, I always enjoy stories like that. It reminds me a lot of Don't Be Afraid of the Dark.
Yeah, it's very similar to Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. Yeah.
I would never stop comparing it to Revenge of the Tooth Fairy because I feel like it's kind of a little, just a hint bit.
Perfect example of a very '90s soundtrack, Bride of Chucky. That is just straight up in your face, like heavy metal. It's just pure guitars, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
That's a prime example of like what music in the '90s horror movies was kind of going for, because they were like, it's the '90s, everything sucks, we're pissed off at everything. So like that's kind of how it was.
Very grungy.
Yeah, exactly.
About like Bride of Chucky, I love this movie to death. I can quote it all day long. But like the thing about it is that it uses a lot of edgier pop music.
Yeah, a lot of licensed music.
A lot of licensed music, which is why we can't really concentrate too much on the soundtrack. I mean, I can go back to watch it to see, but it's very soundtrack heavy because we have the call me.
Yeah, exactly.
We have Rob Zombie. We have we have so many licensed music, and I mean I enjoy it because it just really shows like that girl grunge, like maybe very 80s, but going into like these early 90s feel, but for sure.
Yeah, actually, I would even consider this. I would consider the '90s the rise of licensed music in horror movies.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because it kind of breached into the early 2000s too, with like House of a Thousand Corpses.
Oh,
Rob Zombie made a song specifically for the movie, and not only that, there's which I will forever associate this song now with the song "Brick House." Like when they use it in House of a Thousand Corpses.
Oh yeah.
And like every time I hear that song "Brick House," I'm like, oh my god, they're torturing Dwight from The Office.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's definitely one of those things where it's just the 90s was very licensed music.
Yeah, like, it was kind of a transitional period for sure.
Yeah. And I don't know if it was the right move for a lot of horror films. It just works for...
Depends on the horror film, yeah.
Like a very simple teen horror film, I think you should say.
Like something like I Know What You Did Last Summer. Something like that type of movie.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
I guess more to take away more of the scare factor for them to kind of ease into with the horror.
Yeah, to make it more accessible for people to go and watch it, I think too. Like make it more appealing for everybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But and again, going into the 2000s now, we do see another rise in like orchestral pieces of music. Like, and we were talking about this right before we started the episode, Charlie Clouser.
Oh yeah.
Like one of the best, in my opinion, one of the best soundtracks for a horror movie is Saw. Like Charlie Clouser made Saw, and like you hear Hello Zep, and it's just like it's literally what they would use in every single Saw trailer because everybody's like the best song,
Yeah, it definitely has like that buildup of like we hear this kind of like a industrial sound starting and then it just goes
Hmm.
into this um kind of like a wave of or like an orchestra of buildup until it goes
Yeah,
builds up and builds up and builds up until we find
exactly.
final scene or the final product of whatever limb was cut off or whatever the hell you may call it. You know, I was talking to someone about this, straying away. I'm awful. Um, he never the he never goes to jail because he actually never puts a finger on his victims.
Well,
And I'm
that
like,
and because he always managed a way to wriggle himself out of a situation too.
yeah, but the thing is, like, how could he go to jail if he never laid hands on them?
Well, for kidnapping at least, he would go to jail.
Yeah, I guess. But like,
And I guess would that be considered, I guess, second degree murder because it's sort of premeditated?
no, because he wants them to live, but he's
Yeah,
giving them the option of like, if you want to live, you have to do this. You're
mm,
gonna have to sacrifice like part of your body,
that's
but
true.
you're not gonna die about it. But if you're not gonna do it correctly, then you're fucked.
That's true. Yeah, you got a point there. But I would still
Like,
say he goes to jail for kidnapping straight up.
you know, there's a solution on how to get out or potentially for everybody to survive.
Yeah,
But there's always that one asshole is like, yeah, this is a bunch of crap, a bunch of
yeah.
bullshit.
Well, I mean, there's also going to be you probably go to jail for torture. So that would be considered torture, whether it's emotional or physical torture.
Really his hand on them, and there's and he's never mostly seen except for kidnapping. Anyway, sorry, went on
Well,
another tangent.
yeah, a whole other tangent. That's the finer points of the Saw franchise, which will probably be used for another episode at one point or another.
Uh-huh.
Hint, hint. But another quick thing about Charlie Clouser, which I actually didn't know until like 2 or 3 years ago. Charlie Clouser is responsible for the American Horror Story theme song. Like,
Yeah,
we can thank Charlie Clouser for such a great theme song for a TV show.
yeah, and the fact that he does different variations
Mm-hmm.
of each season is actually fantastic. I don't know. I feel awful because there is the. I'm pretty sure he might have composed most of all of American Horror
Oh no, yeah,
Story.
he was the main composer of like the series in general.
So like, I actually found the girl on TikTok, the one that does the Coven chant.
Ooh,
And she
nice.
also does her own music as well. So she like it's definitely one of those iconic pieces I think for me
Mm-hmm.
and Coven
I mean,
because it's
she also might have contributed to the score for that specific season too.
but mind you that Coven also does come back multiple times because
True.
it's one of those really I guess it's a more easy to captivate concept for the viewer, especially
Mm-hmm.
that we do see it in not only
Well,
what
it's
was it?
also not only that too. I think it
Hotel,
says
and
like
we also see it in
in Apocalypse, right?
yeah.
I think it's also has to do with the characters because a lot of the characters in Coven were so likable and they had their own identity, and I think people really resonated with that. So that's probably why I think they kept bringing them back because they were so
Yeah.
popular. It's like so many popular characters in there.
Yeah, I think with Hotel and Coven, the soundtrack is inevitably like unforgettable, and it
Hmm.
definitely like it's one of those masterpieces within that series. And
Yeah.
also the fact that I think it's I this is where it's a little weird because
Hmm.
this is when we're talking about licensing music. I right now 1984 is my favorite season for a lot of reasons because it's 80s slasher. You know, Friday the 13th kind of a vibe. It just has all those elements together that I just love about 80s horror films. But it has a lot of licensing, which
Mm.
I feel like they could have done without. I feel like they could have added a little bit more of the because they are very synthwave heavy. I think in that season.
Okay. See,
That's why,
I can't comment on that because I actually haven't seen 1984 just yet.
yeah,
I'm I'm very very behind on American Horror Story to the
yeah.
point where I'm still on Freak Show right now.
Oh,
Like I haven't gotten
shit.
to anything else. Like I've seen Hotel because I saw Hotel when it was on, like when it was being aired at the time, but I had never seen the previous seasons. So I was like, all right,
Yeah,
let me catch up, and it's just taking me a while because I'm always so busy. Plus, I watch a bunch of other shows at the same time, and also,
yeah,
I mean, Mandalorian took up most of my time because
yeah.
I have honestly rewatched Mandalorian so many times at this point. It's ridiculous. Like I have single handedly brought up the ratings for Mandalorian.
Yeah, I'm pretty. Yeah, but with the coven, the chant, we also have Dominique, which is a no
No,
in
no.
asylum, and it's weird because there was one time, like one of my bosses at work was asking me, "Well, how do I know this song?" And I'm like, "Oh, because I like it." I mean, trying to lie to him, I don't watch psychopath horror films, so of course not.
No,
Like,
it's funny. My brother, he just gets annoyed every time he hears that song because we would hear it all the time in the queue for horror nights when we went to the second version of the American Horror Story house. So you're constantly
yeah.
just hearing Dominique, and he's just like stop.
Yeah,
Oh man, but it brought back some good memories for me because I really liked Asylum as a season, and I liked that section of the house as well for horror nights. So I liked it in general.
it's great. It was a great section, but it was very small.
It was. I wish it was a little bit longer,
And
but
Coven was small too.
yeah,
I was
Coven
upset.
was
I was like,
great though.
yeah.
Yeah,
You should have done a little. It concentrated a little bit too much on Roanoke, which was a little
yeah,
weird.
because well, at the same time, Roanoke was like the big season that had just come out or was just in the middle of being aired. That's probably why they were just like, let's advertise Coven. It's the newest thing we got.
Yeah, I liked Roanoke, but it's not my favorite.
I've heard
It's like
Roanoke is just like kind of weird, like how they tell the stories is really weird.
through like a documentary style,
Yeah,
which it was a unique approach. I don't hate it as much as I hate Cult or Freak or not Freak Show. Uh,
Apocalypse.
no, I actually enjoyed Apocalypse. I don't.
Which came out? Which one came out after Cult? I thought it was Apocalypse.
No, Cult. There was seven, which was Roanoke. Then it
You know
was.
what? I just realized we're going on a whole
Sorry. All right. Sorry. Yeah.
we're going on a whole tangent regarding American Horror Story. That is actually a completely different episode that we've discussed. So we will come back to that at one point or another, though.
Yeah, we're awful.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it happens. It's okay. There's one more thing I want to mention about Charlie Clouser because I don't know why I feel like he's one of my favorite horror composers now.
Yeah.
The music for Dead Silence was really really good as well.
Oh yeah,
Dead Silence has a great soundtrack.
I love having the ringtone for how not the ringtone for Halloween season. I sometimes put it,
Oh
but
yeah,
I think I don't know if he was in charge of it or else someone had tried to do almost okay. So I know it's a completely different concept, but you know how we had Dead Silence, where it's of course the really creepy, um, like almost like a jingle type, and then it goes into a really intense, like orchestral
piece of yeah.
piece kind of thing. But like it reminded me a little bit of the one horror film which I don't remember. I know the name of the movie and I know the ringtone, but I don't. It's One Missed Call, and it
Yeah, I was
reminds me
about to say it's one missed call because I remember I had that ringtone for a while on my phone. Like that was my ringtone for the longest time.
yeah, like it reminds me a little bit of
Yeah,
that. It's like I don't remember the horror film for the life of
but
me.
I remember
But
the
when that
ringtone.
movie came out, it was like that was the scariest shit. Like it's
Hmm.
just like those horror film things. Like a movie that didn't stand out to me that much, but a soundtrack actually stood like not a soundtrack. I
Like a
guess a sound
jingle. I would say a jingle.
like literally stuck in my head. It's
Mm,
like it contributes to like the music of that. It's a
yeah.
little just like the stupid Happy Death Day. Hey, it's your birthday. Time
Oh
to
my
pick up.
god. Happy Death
Yeah,
Day. Oh man, every time I hear that ringtone, I'm like, I love it though. It's so ingrained in me in my head at this point.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, going into the 2010s now, I would say the biggest soundtracks, funny enough, are the Halloween remake or the Halloween reboot. Because of course they brought John Carpenter back. They had Cody Carpenter, his son, and they had another composer whose name just escapes me at the moment. But
Hmm.
there was a perfect mix of new music with the old themes of the original Halloween.
Yeah.
And I remember because I have it on Blu-ray, I remember seeing like the behind the scenes stuff on on the music. And there's this one piece of that documentary that always stuck out to me. It's also like one of my favorite pieces in the movie itself, where they have Cody Carpenter with a guitar, but he also has like a cello, like I don't know the word for it, like when they used to play the cello, and he's
Yeah.
using that on the guitar, and it makes like such a creepy effect.
Damn.
And it's just it's like every time I'm listening to the soundtrack, I'm like so ready for when I get to that part.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think I've only. The Halloween remake is more. Are you talking about the
I yeah
2008?
I didn't mean to say remake. I meant like the 2018 Halloween, like the
Yeah, I was about to
the
say
newest
they
Halloween.
made one in 2000.
Yeah, I misspoke. I wasn't trying to mention
Yeah, it
the
was
Rob
still
Zombie
great.
one.
I loved it. Yeah, I was like, yeah, wait, are we talking about two different things? No. I was like, but
Whoops.
I knew what you were talking about though, because I was like, well, I feel like that's the only remake unless either I'm missing and I'm just skipping around and I'm just not caring. Then if that's fine, but no, I'm glad that I'm still on track and
Yeah,
not.
no, it was just my mistake. I misspoke.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think I'm gonna give a special mention to the soundtrack for Us.
Oh yeah.
The
I.
soundtrack for Us is so good. Like the opening song with like the chanting,
Mhm.
and as it builds into like, almost like an African beat.
Yeah.
Oh
I
man, it's so good.
I think I will go. We need to do an episode on Us because
Hmm.
yo, I go through this movie through and through, and I never stop studying it
Hmm.
because I feel like this concept that Jordan Peele has ingrained story wise is definitely something that I've thought about and like thinking that it's. I mean, maybe like we have another side of us that we're
Hmm.
not knowing about it, but it was something. It was always a concept I always had in my head. But like with the soundtrack, it's definitely
Yeah,
it really brings out the eerie. It brings out anything that's mysterious that is unknown
yeah,
to them.
like
Because
the
the person who is alive doesn't know that. I mean, of course, but then all the crazy stuff that happens in the movie, and
yeah.
then there's the remix of Five on It, which I normally I don't have major problems with remixes of songs, but I think this one was very well done where it had all the excuse to be that good.
Yeah.
So I
Well, it's
was,
also because it took that song Five on it, but it also makes it with something that they had written for the soundtrack, which is a song called, I think it's like Pas de Deux, because it's meant to
yeah.
be like a ballet type of song, which is like that's the original song that has like the dun 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 dun. Like even that, it's just like they're like stabbing that violin almost because it's so like in your
Yeah.
face, you know.
So the scene that I'm gonna talk about is literally the fight between both the protagonist and
Hmm.
the I guess you could say the
Her
other
other version, yeah.
other version. We see the fight. We see who's strong, who's not. But we see past flashbacks of her being perfect dancing. Then we see the other one doing not so well, and it's kind of like a battle of like I guess it's an internal battle within
Hmm.
herself and like outer. But I feel like it's just portrayed so well within that entire
Exactly.
fight that it's just like wow, like it's always intense every time I watch it. I'm like, ah. But then the end always throws me off. I'm not going to
Yeah.
spoil it. Sorry.
And I mean, there's also what we already discussed too about the Invisible Man soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
I think that since we also had like the whole Conjuring universe, there's a lot of
The
musical pieces in there. Like the actual Conjuring soundtrack is
yeah,
pretty good. I haven't listened to it in a while just because I haven't seen The Conjuring in like a year, maybe a little bit more. Oh, I was like, wait, what happened? I didn't realize you were clapping. I was like, oh god.
I was doing the clapping from The Conjuring. It's
The
like
whole
first
clapping.
clap.
Oh god, no, it's too much.
That shit was always, that first movie came out. It was just intense.
Yeah, I remember seeing that and just
Creation
being
was out there
yeah,
for me.
the movie was pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What Conjuring is with the nun and Annabelle, right? I could
Yes, yes.
okay.
It's what led to Annabelle and the Nun and all that stuff.
Yeah, Annabelle Creation was actually
Annabelle Creation is great.
Yeah, like I don't care what anybody says. I know like Annabelle Comes Home is a little iffy, but like Annabelle Creation was.
I haven't seen Annabelle Comes Home yet. I have only seen the first Annabelle, which was and Annabelle Creation, but I haven't seen the third one yet.
Yeah, but definitely the Conjuring universe does have a very intense soundtrack.
Yeah.
It has that orchestral type music, but we're gonna have to go back and study it or do a episode on it at some point, or watch all of them and man up and watch all of them, because I watched that movie and I was traumatized. But
Yeah. Oh, and there's also Insidious, like the Insidious soundtracks with the fucking broken piano sounds. Because it's literally what they did. They played like a 78-year-old piano and like smashed the keys, which is why it sounds like so messed up.
Yeah.
Oh man, like that's terrifying.
That's the one thing that sticks out about Insidious, though, is that they just do the creepiest sounds. Like it's just unnerving because it's like describing almost like the presence of a demon, like
exactly.
anything that's like unknown, like it's just so unnerving, and the fact that they play with the imagery of like you see nothing, and we're going almost into a dream-like state, but not really. It's just wow. That movie is always so intense.
And again, Tiny Tim.
Tiny Tim.
Tiny motherfucking Tim.
Yeah. The innocent song turned into absolute torture.
Yeah, it really does. But I think we
iconic. Yeah, those are a lot of iconic movies that at least in the early 2000s to 2010s. It's just like those movies that have continued franchises. Honestly, I didn't think Insidious or Conjuring they were gonna have a franchise at all.
I don't think they were expecting it either. But they were so surprised by how well the movies did that like they were just like, fuck it, let's keep it coming.
Yeah, absolutely. They were just the new Saw of the generation at that point.
Yeah. I do think that like Insidious kind of dropped off a little bit like after Insidious 2. Insidious 3 was good, but then like you can tell that it was like not as good as the other ones. Like it was still a relatively entertaining movie though. Insidious Last Key, which I think is the next one that came out, wasn't too bad. It was. I liked it for the story because I like that they kind of go back to Elise and like they talk about Elise. But that's a whole other thing. That has nothing to do with the soundtrack. That's just me talking about Insidious. But yeah, I think we actually did a pretty good retrospective of the horror movie soundtracks through the years. Like we kind of talked about some of the major points of the low points. Yeah, I think we did pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, we strayed off a couple of times, but
it happens.
We haven't done this in a while, so I guess it's just the chatterboxes in us, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think we're gonna end this episode here. Yeah. So Vania, where can we find you on the social stuff?
You can find me on Twitter at HHNCultist or on YouTube. Of course, under the same name, HHN Cultist. I do makeup videos, vlogs, and also just talk about horror and Halloween Horror Nights. Obviously, now that we are in a new year, we are starting to anxiously wait for speculations, rumors, and whatnot. but we are hopeful to receive some.
Yes,
Soon.
especially because hopefully things are gonna get better world-wide.
Yeah, I mean, I already have a really strong feeling that we might have a HHN or at least a dumbed down version of it
Mhm.
because we are having Mardi Gras.
That's true.
Instead of
Which I'm very excited for, by the way. The way they do a Mardi Gras this year is going to be really fun.
Yeah,
But anyway.
instead of doing 3 months, they're going to do 1 month. So I'm going to assume if we do get an HHN, it's going to be 1 month instead of
like a month and a half. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
a 2 month, like 1 month and a half, something like that. But yeah.
So that's going to be a little bit intense for capacity reasons,
Yeah.
unless they're going to do an all-day thing like they did last year.
Exactly. And then for us, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube as Sounds from the Grave. Granted, the Sounds from the Grave YouTube hasn't been updated in quite a bit. Holidays being a major reason, stress from work being another major reason, but I do have some stuff that I'm currently editing that is going to be out pretty soon. Just stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
And then on my personal stuff, you can find me on Twitter at itbeyusef. Find me on Instagram at Yussef1220, and I'm also on YouTube my name, just Yussef Sabat.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what we're gonna end it here. Remember, guys, if you smuck, you're gonna get fucked.
Yo, we need to get someone on that shirt. We need to get that shirt out, my dude.
We need to start and we're gonna start a hashtag. If you smuck, you die. If you smuck, you're gonna get fucked. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast episode, and if you're watching it, I hope you enjoyed the video. And we will catch you guys pretty soon. We have some more stuff coming out of the pipeline, so stay tuned.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So have a good night, stay
Bye.
safe, and bye.